Good morning, folks. Mo is still here with us. I am, again, having to go into work early today, or not early, but I want to get a walk in and some other stuff done before that, get the house cleaned up and all that stuff, so I thought I'd get up a little bit early. By South Dakota time, old Mo here is doing what he can to stay here as the official pup of the Cigarette Burn series. He's the official dog. Make no mistake, there are many dogs like him, but this dog is mine. Alright, so now we're talking about number 6 in the countdown, which is 2001: A Space Odyssey. So let's take a look here, make sure that I am correct here on what I said. I have been completing the list of the top 100, so, as time has been going on, I've been getting further and further down the list. It is actually very, very hard to do it after about 50, because the first 50 films, the greatest 50 films of all time, are fairly easy to understand as to why they are. But once you start getting beyond 50, you really have this kind of almost personal taste element that comes into play, which is really, really difficult to explain because, like, as a filmmaker like I am, or have been sometimes, more of a writer now at this point, but we'll see how the rest of the thing goes as far as it. Mo is trying to fall asleep behind me. Apparently he doesn't want to go for a walk this morning, but it's too bad. So you get into like a personal taste, like what do you like? And I'll give you an example of what I mean. I have Dark Crystal and the Goonies in the top 100, okay? Dark Crystal and the Goonies. Now, I'll give you an example. I feel like Dark Crystal, at least at this point, and I have not, this is not cemented in any way, shape, or form. I have it labeled as 51 of the greatest films of all time. And Goonies is going to be closer to the mid-60s, late 60s, somewhere in there. Now, you may ask, well, why do you have those up there? They can't possibly be the greatest films of all time. That is true, because there are probably some films, honestly, that are better than them. I can think of 20 Betty Davis films that are better than Dark Crystal. There's no doubt about it. Whether you're talking about now Voyager or All About Eve, which I already have listed, but there are other ones too. Dark Victory. I mean, you can go down and down and down. What's the Matter with Baby, or Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. All of those films are outstanding, and in many ways, as far as thematically, they are better than Dark Crystal. So this is where it gets into personal taste. Now, I can argue all day long why Dark Crystal is 51 of the greatest of all time, but once you get past really 50, then you start to have to make choices on what kind of cinema that you like. And the reason I like Dark Crystal, it's fantasy. It tells a great original story. Puppeteering, this is puppeteering at its peak. There's all kinds of elements that go into it. Whereas Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte had none of that. It was just a great story, right? But those can be considered to be better. So I would preface this when I do release my list as they get further and further in, that after really 50, there is room for a lot of interpretation as to what you consider to be better and what you consider to be worse. But the first 50 are pretty much. I'm not saying I'm completely right. I'm not. But what I'm saying is that it's a very, very good understanding of what the greatest films of all time is. But once you get past 50, you're getting into personal taste much more than people realize. So with that being said, let's move on to number 6, which is 2001: A Space Odyssey. The reason it is number 6 is that not only is it a fantastic film, which it is visually the most visually appealing film of all time. And really, because film is a visual medium, why wouldn't this be number 6? I could even see it being made to be a case that it's greater than the 5th film that I have listed, which is The African Queen, visually, because it is a visual medium. I just happen to prefer really good love stories over science fiction adventures. That's just me. Because a great love story is, considering that most of life is about love, or the pursuit of love, or whatever you would call it. It certainly doesn't feel like love sometimes. Did I get an amen? Anyway, I just think that telling a great love story is more universal than telling a science fiction story. Because certainly science fiction is important, and it tells us where we're going and where we're at. You'll never find something that's more salient to the time period that it is in than science fiction. When they did Star Trek, they weren't talking about whatever time period Star Trek took place in. They were talking about the 1960s and the 1950s. So there you go. But 2001, as I said before, the most visually appealing film of all time. Hardly any dialogue. I don't know how Kubrick got all of that done without boring the bejesus out of people. And there are people that do get bored by this film, there's no doubt. But pound for pound, when you go to watch this film, most people are not bored with it. They're fascinated by it, which is an amazing accomplishment, considering there's no dialogue in the damn film at all. I don't even know how you could do that other than being Kubrick and spending 8 years on a film. I can't even express to you how much I like this film. Personally, from a filmmaker's point of view, a writer's point of view, just a person that watches cinema point of view, everything about this film is great. There's no element. Everything is pitch perfect. Whether it be HAL 9000's voice, to the creepy red eye, to whatever. It doesn't matter. It's all 100% perfect for this film. I cannot think of a more appealing film to watch if you want to be a director than this film. If you've ever considered the art of direction, then this film is an absolute must to watch. It is an absolute must. There should be no reason why you don't watch this film. There should be no reason if you are a director. And if any director that I know of has not seen this film, then I don't consider them a director, really, because this is the premier director's film. Okay? Now, obviously, Citizen Kane is beyond. It's a premier director's film. I should probably pull back here for a second because I used the same term twice and meant two different things. Premier directors, as I said before, there are 6 of them. Okay, Scorsese could possibly be considered to be the 7th one of them. You could make a strong argument for it, and because I like Scorsese so much, I would definitely probably agree with you. But there's only 6 that we know of so far, that I know of anyway. The master class of directors fill up the vast majority of directors. Okay, there's probably hundreds of master class directors, whether it be from Michael Bay to Quentin Tarantino, Steven Soderbergh, whatever. I mean, you can go down and on. M. Night Shyamalan, Jordan Peele, blah blah blah. There's a lot of master class directors, and they usually make their living telling their stories the way that they want them shown, and blah blah blah. But Kubrick is a premier director, which means that he was not only a master of his craft, he was a genius of his craft. Okay, because he knew how to tell not only a story well and not how to tell it visually, but just he could tell the best stories of all time in a visual medium. Okay, here's Betty. Notorious Betty has come. Yeah, kitty. All right, so this is a premier. This is really the peak of his creative power. And certainly Kubrick had other great films. There's no doubt about it. I think altogether, there are about 7 films in his whole film canon that are definitely not only worth watching, but some of the best of all time. Okay? And that's a great statement to make, that you've made 7 films that are not only great, but they're some of the greatest of all time. Mm-hmm. Hey, baby. Yeah. Nobody understands you but me. I understand. All right, so back to what I was saying. And Kubrick was a master crafter because he was probably the oddest of all of the 6 because Wells was a technician, just like Eisenstein was, except Wells could tell a better story than Eisenstein. And Hitchcock was a master of suspense, which is one of the greatest forms of telling story if you want people to like it. And John Huston was just a great storyteller because his stories range from all kinds of different things, whether you're talking about I don't know, I'm trying to think, because he directed some great documentaries. He did The African Queen. He did Treasure of the Sierra Madre, The Maltese Falcon. There's all kinds, and those are all different stories, and they were all told very, very well. And John Ford was a great storyteller in the same way as Houston, but he mostly stuck to the Western genre because it was the most popular at that time. And he worked with John Wayne, one of my all-time favorite actors. I could get so much criticism for that, but I say, well, I like Cagney too. I just like if it's going to be a male, then why not have a strong male figure? I don't like weak male figures in cinema. I just don't. I think that some of them are okay. Some of them are okay, but pound for pound, it is better to have a strong male figure in cinema than it is to have a weaker male figure in cinema. Which is why I don't get into a lot of modern romantic films, because usually those characters are very indecisive and they're very weak-willed, and all they want to do is be with this woman and blah blah blah. Okay, well, I get it, but at the end of the day, like, that doesn't seem like a strong enough argument that you really want to be with that woman. Does that make sense? Because you can't make decisions about anything else. What makes this woman so much more special? Whereas if there's a strong man that has his mind made up and he decides to be with a woman, I think that speaks more to the fact that he really does like her. That's just my personal opinion. But it's certainly open to being wrong, but I don't think it is. But back to Kubrick here for a moment, because I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about stuff apparently that I don't need to talk about. So Kubrick, the reason he was the oddest is that he did genre work like Houston and like Ford, but when he told a story that was told well, there was no one that could touch him. Like, I think in the top 50, he's definitely the director that has the most in the top 30 films of all time. I believe he has 3. I believe he has this one, Dr. Strangelove, and I'm trying to think what the other one is, because I know there was one other one. So just give me 1 second here, because I can't pull up all of it, because good Lord, do I have a lot of film knowledge. So sometimes I get bogged down. Let's see here. Okay, well, Kubrick has the most. He has 2 films that are in the top 15. He has, at number 13 is Dr. Strangelove, and number 6 is 2001. And that's an amazing accomplishment. That just is. And he has other great films too, don't get me wrong. He has Spartacus, and there's so many other films that he's done that are great. Don't get me wrong. So, but I mean, to have 2 films in the top 15 of all time, is, I don't even know how you even start with that and saying how good that is. There are even Wells, who was arguably probably the greatest filmmaker of all time. Not the most popular, but probably you could argue was the greatest. Doesn't even have 2 films in the top 15 like Kubrick does. So, he definitely has them, and his films were almost always good, but it's just not the same. And Kubrick is just an amazing director. And I can't think of something that's more influential to at least my friends growing up. I mean, we all loved cinema growing up, but oh my God, did we love Kubrick? We loved Clockwork Orange, all kinds of films that he made. We just loved them. We even watched, it really got most of my friends interested in cinema, because then they would watch like Barry Lyndon, I think is the name of it, and just different ones like that. So there you go. I mean, and I thought Eyes Wide Shut would have been one of the better ones of his career too, but unfortunately passed on when the principal filmmaking was done, which with Kubrick doesn't mean much. That was maybe, I think it was about halfway through, and then that's being generous, halfway through the actual film being made. And Spielberg picked it up, and Spielberg is no Kubrick. Spielberg is a good director. He's a masterclass director, don't get me wrong, but he's no Kubrick. So, and I'm sorry, Mr. Spielberg, I just got to be honest. I mean, I ain't going to be no Kubrick neither, so, don't take offense to it, please. But, yeah, again, if you like cinema, then watch this film if you've not seen it. There should be no excuse for anyone that even has a remote passion for watching film to have not seen this film. It's about that simple. If you have not seen this film and you're starting to grow into liking cinema, then this is the film for you to start off with. Either this or A Clockwork Orange. I think A Clockwork Orange is more appropriate for teenagers because it deals with teenagers. But this one is just it's just lush in every way, shape, or form. I love the scene where he goes from Jupiter into the infinite. That is the trippiest, coolest scene ever filmed. There's a lot of stories on how he did that, but I won't bore you with them. But again, there's no excuse for not seeing this film if you even remotely like cinema. So I'm going to leave it at that because I've said that about 15 times because I really do believe that that is true. But again, go see 2001. Hopefully they'll re-release it into the theater here eventually. So until then, I'll be Zen.